Okay, we will go ahead and start back. There are 5 questions from the audience, and well, we have selected 5. There were several more, obviously, and these are some good questions. And we selected questions that had not been asked or had not been fully answered. So we will ask these 5 questions for the audience, and I'm indeed grateful that y'all came up with a good list of questions and so forth. And I want to compliment y'all too. It has been very smooth and efficient. Let's see here. The last question was to, okay, Mr. Johnson, the question goes to you first. If you both support the Second Amendment, why has the NRA endorsed Mr. Johnson with an A- while giving Mr. Schiffer a C+?
That's very simple. It's because of the votes, 4 major votes that he cast during the year 2011. In 2010, the concealed constitutional carry bill passed the House. It was blocked in the Senate. In November of that year, 2010, there was an election. November 2010, the Tea Party sent a lot of people scurrying out of the Wyoming legislature. And then 3 months later, the same bill went right through the House and right through the Senate. My opponent voted against it again. Other bills as well, like the right, constitutional amendment on the right to hunt and fish and trap. It's a very simple thing, just enshrining in the Constitution that we have the tradition and the right to do those things. Very simple. My opponent voted against it, along with 9 people, but it passed. And was signed into law. So there should be when you go to the poll in November, there should be something for you to vote on as a constitutional amendment, whether we in Wyoming have the right to hunt and fish and trap.
Senator?
Again, let me go over. When you pledge a vote to an outside interest, that's exactly what it means. You pledge to vote the way they tell you. I've never signed that. I always get a C+ rating because I vote in support of gun ownership, being able to carry guns, but I do it in a way that suits Wyoming. I don't know of anyone in Wyoming that wants us to say, if you're a 12, a 13, 14, 15-year-old student, you can pack a gun on a bus. If you put it in the Constitution, then you take away the ability to tell that young person, don't bring a gun onto the bus. In terms of the constitutional right to hunt and fish, we have the right to hunt and fish. That's a piece of legislation looking for a problem to solve. The problem doesn't exist. We have wonderful hunting here. I'm very proud of our hunting. I enjoy hunting myself. To say we have to enshrine it in the Constitution, as I said, it's not a problem. We already have it. I consider amendments to the Constitution to be very, very serious. We've lived with our Constitution since 1890. When we go in to amend it, it's serious business. Frivolous amendments, I think, have no place in our discussion.
Mr. Johnson, you have a 1-minute rebuttal if you wish. Okay, thank you. Senator, next question. Please state clearly your views on marriage. Does this play into your legislative pursuit should you be elected again?
Marriage in Wyoming is defined as a union between a man and a woman. And that's exactly what the statute says, exactly. That's crystal clear to me. I support it. Enough said. The statute is absolutely clear. Marriage is between a man and a woman in the state of Wyoming.
Mr. Johnson?
This particular thing needs to be codified in the Constitution, which my opponent is against. Allowing the citizens of the state to vote on whether marriage is between a man and a woman. It's so simple. Up at the Main Street Diner where I eat quite a bit, you know, the word sort of passes around, you know. This thing between two men getting married or two women getting married, you know, it's going too far. Is the next thing going to be a man and his sheep wanting to get married? Well, that's where it's going, folks. I guess I'm just an old timer, but I don't fall for these new age fads and fashions. New age of Aquarius. It's fashionable in other places like Minnesota and Colorado and New York City and San Francisco. But this is Wyoming, folks, and the people of Johnson County and Sheridan County don't want it.
Senator, do you desire a 1 minute? Okay. Mr. Johnson, next question is yours. Are you pro-life? Psalm says, when you were in the womb, you were fearfully and wonderfully made. Does this sound like to you that life is sacred and precious in the womb?
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand what you said.
Are you pro-life? Psalm says, when you were in the womb, you were fearfully and wonderfully made. Does this sound like to you that life is sacred and precious in the womb?
Well, I certainly can't argue with that. That's asked and answered. The question was asked and it was answered, and correctly. I have no argument with that at all.
Senator?
I am pro-choice. I believe that those kind of decisions are best made between a woman, and I think oftentimes, I know in our case, that Nancy and I talk about things like that, whether it's birth control or whatever, but that's a man and a wife talking about the health care of a woman. I think that kind of thing is not something that 90 members of the Wyoming legislature should even be messing with. That's a very, very private matter. The good thing about the Republican Party, and I've been a Republican for 40 years, the Republican Party doesn't even deal with that. It's not part of our platform. It's not part of our issues. The Republican Party considers that a private issue. But I'll say, just in case anybody misunderstands, I am pro-choice. I believe in the right of a woman to decide whether it's in a discussion with her doctor, her spouse, or whatever, perhaps maybe even her priest. That is a private decision and has no business being decided by us in the legislature.
Mr. Johnson, you have a 1 minute rebuttal if you wish.
No rebuttal.
Okay. Senator, have you pledged to any outside groups, and if so, which ones are they and why?
In 19 years, I have never signed a pledge to any outside groups. My allegiance, my responsibility has always been to my friends, my neighbors, my constituents in Senate District 2. I will assure you, I am not going to pledge my vote to groups from Washington, D.C., from Virginia, from Cheyenne, and as far as I know, my opponent has pledged to groups in between all that. I don't know. I don't do that sort of thing. I'm responsible to you folks. You hire me every 4 years if you vote for me. If you don't like what I'm doing, you vote me out. But I will not vote on behalf of outside interests, and I will not promise my vote to anyone outside of Senate District 22.
Mr. Johnson, you got the floor.
I already said, folks, that I signed the pledge to the Americans on Tax Reform that I will oppose any and all tax increases and fee increases, whether it's on hunting licenses or driver's licenses or anything else. Other than that, I've not made a formal pledge, I believe. However, it's probably pretty close to that, to watch that I support the sanctity of life and I support the traditional marriage. I've had enough of you see, that's one advantage of not having lived in Wyoming all my life, or 40 years, or 30, or even 20, because I've seen what crazy things go on out there in the rest of this world. I lived in Minneapolis for 36 years. The place was taken over by radical lesbians. And they get married, they have a kid somehow or another, and then they've now figured out that there are 510 rights that they're not allowed because they're not allowed to get married in the state of Minnesota. Well, it's fine and dandy for two men, or two women, if they want to go off in a cave someplace or off to Kearney and live in a log cabin. But to expect the taxpayers to give them all sorts of benefits that go to married people, legally married people, is wrong.
Senator, you have a 1-minute rebuttal if you wish. Okay. The final question is to Mr. Johnson. Would you explain what, if any, safeguards should be placed on the extraction of Wyoming minerals and other natural resources?
Well, that is a very broad and open-ended question. But I can only answer it in the same fashion. It depends upon having people in the legislature who understand chemical engineering and technology and industrial chemistry, and I sure do. But you know, we got an awful lot of lawyers and business administration people down there in Cheyenne. And they don't know much more than a few buzzwords. They're not able to really evaluate things. So, good chemical engineering practice would certainly dictate removing resources from underground in such a fashion that it was not really unreasonably and imprudently restorable. This happened all over this country. We've been mining underground resources for 200 years.
Senator?
It seems to me that there are some areas that we need to pay attention to when we talk about mineral development. And I'll kind of list 4 of them. First thing, we need to protect our way of life. Some of the best paying jobs in Schiffer and Johnson County are in the development of our natural resources, gas, oil, coal, uranium. We need those jobs. Our young people need those jobs. And we can balance, and I believe we have reached a balance, between our way of life, open space, if you will, the ability to recreate, to go fish, to go hunt, to just enjoy the outdoors with mineral development. It is a balance, and I think we can continue to do that. Second thing we've got to be very cognizant of is protecting our water. Water is the lifeblood of this state. Particularly a year like this, we've got to protect our water, and I think we've done a good job of that. But a couple areas where we're struggling, and I admit it. We've got to take care of the safety of our workers. Wyoming has the worst safety record of any state in the union. We're working on it. We're working with industry, not imposing new laws. That isn't how you do it. You get them to buy into it. You get them to work with you to make our workplaces safety, and I hope we could protect our workers, because we're not doing too good so far. And the last one is we need to develop enhanced value for our minerals. For example, we need to develop the ability and actually implement changing coal into liquids that's saleable, coal into gas. We can do that with research, with people that are up to date on research. We can do that through our university. But again, we can do that in partnership with private industry, such as our partnership with General Electric, which I help promote.
Mr. Johnson, you have a 1-minute rebuttal if you wish. Thank you. Okay, it's time for closing remarks. Senator, you have the first closing remarks. You have 2 minutes.
First of all, thank you to the Buffalo Bulletin for holding this forum. I appreciate it. Second of all, thank you to you all. You've elected me time and again to go down and represent you in the Senate. I hope I've done a good job. I've tried my best. I'm very knowledgeable about this area, the people who live here, and particularly about our lifestyle. I live it also. I grew up with it. I still live it. I still love it, quite frankly. I think that I can represent you in Cheyenne, and I think I could do a good job of it. I also am open to any discussions, be it by phone, by email, or in person. I don't think I've ever turned anyone down, not that I can remember. I hope not. But I've done the best I can do. I hope you'll send me back again. My work is not finished. I think I have the experience, and I think I have some ability to enact the programs and the efforts that you have sent me down there to do for the past 19 years. Thank you.
I've lived in Kearney for 4 years. I may be a latecomer, but I love Wyoming. I love being up there on the ridge in the solace of open spaces. It is magnificent, particularly since I escaped, as I tell people, from communist Minneapolis.
Oh, please.
When I went to Minneapolis in 1972, it was a great city. But I'll tell you, times change. And I finally got out of there. You may ask, you may wonder, why is this old codger, 83 years old, running for senator There's a couple of reasons. I said one of them last Thursday night and showed them. My great-great-great-grandfather, Valentine Peyton, he fought in the Revolutionary War. I'm doing it for him. I didn't completely answer a question, I realized, an earlier question which asked how much money I'd spent. Well, I've spent about $13,000, but it's all out of my own pocket except $200 and I think $75, 76. It's my own money. It doesn't come from anybody else. It sure as hell doesn't come from out of this state, as the Obama smear campaign is trying to say. My opponent may say that he's not going to trade his vote for an endorsement, but his record of contributions, $5,400 in the 2008 cycle, which is the last one reported, surely shows, and 20% of that's from out of the state, surely shows that people appreciate his votes. And who those people are, they're not a penny of it came from ordinary citizens in Schiffer or Johnson County. Not a penny of that $5,400. Not a penny.
Thank you, gentlemen. This concludes the Buffalo Bulletin's Senatorial District 22 debate. We'd like to thank everybody for coming, and we deeply appreciate you being here, and we deeply appreciate the questions that you provided. I'd also like to thank Senator and Mr. Johnson for your participation. Have a good evening.